want you to feel confident and prepared for your OCR Gateway GCSE Biology Paper 1 with our 2025 predicted papers. Last year, we came incredibly close to predicting every single topic correctly. This year, we've analysed all the latest trends and patterns once again to bring you a really strong revision resource. Now, these predicted papers come with exam-style questions that are carefully designed to match the real thing. They also include mark schemes so that you can see exactly how to structure your answers and score top marks. And new for 2025, we're offering free video walkthroughs that show you how to write answers in the way examiners love. Now, if you want even more support, you can join our masterclasses. These give you access to our revision accelerator course during the school holidays, as well as live exam prep sessions the night before your exam as well, giving you that kind of final confidence boost. Now, we've done the hard work in preparing the resources, but don't forget it's still essential to revise everything so you're fully prepared. Now, if you're ready to boost your grade, make sure to grab the predicted papers and save your spot in the masterclass. As always, make sure to use the timestamps because we're going to work through separate higher, combined higher, separate foundation, and then combined foundation as well. So let's start with separate higher for your biology paper 1. They are, of course, based on careful analysis of past trends, but remember to revise the full course content to ensure you're really ready for your exam. Now, photosynthesis is one of the key topics we suggest revising first and foremost. The word equation that you need to know here is carbon dioxide plus water produces glucose and oxygen. Photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplasts, which contain chlorophyll to absorb light energy. Make sure you know that several factors affect the rate of photosynthesis. Light intensity plays a major role, with more light leading to more photosynthesis up to a certain point. Carbon dioxide concentration also matters. More carbon dioxide means more photosynthesis. Temperature affects the enzymes involved. If it's too low, the reaction slows down. If it's too high, the enzymes can denature and stop working. For the required practical, you should be able to describe how to investigate the effect of light on photosynthesis. This involves placing pondweed into a beaker of water, shining a light at different distances, and either counting the bubbles of oxygen produced or measuring the volume of gas collected. Cell transport is another important area to revise. Diffusion is the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to low concentration. It's a passive process and doesn't require energy. Examples include oxygen and carbon dioxide moving in and out of cells, and glucose and amino acids being absorbed in the small intestine. Active transport, on the other hand, moves substances from a low concentration to a high concentration and does require energy. Examples include root hair cells absorbing minerals from the soil and reabsorption of glucose in the kidneys. And next we have homeostasis. Homeostasis is about maintaining a constant internal environment. In terms of blood glucose control, insulin lowers blood sugar by telling the liver to store glucose as glycogen, while glucagon raises blood sugar by signaling the liver to release stored glucose. Diabetes is closely linked to this process. In type 1 diabetes, the body doesn't produce insulin and it must be treated with injections. In type 2 diabetes, the cells stop responding to insulin and it's usually managed through diet and exercise. You'll also need to understand plant transport. The xylem carries water and minerals up the plant in one direction only. It's made of dead cells and its walls are strengthened with lignin. The phloem, in contrast, carries sugars and nutrients both up and down the plant. It's made of living cells and contains structures called sieve plates. Also here, transpiration is the loss of water vapour from the leaves through the stomata. Several factors can increase the rate of transpiration, including higher temperature, lower humidity, increased wind, and greater light intensity. The required practical for this topic involves using a potometer to measure water uptake by a plant. You then change environmental conditions such as temperature, wind, or light intensity to observe how they affect the rate of transpiration. In the topic of reproduction, you should understand the differences between sexual and asexual reproduction. Now, sexual reproduction involves two parents and produces offspring that are genetically different, which leads to variation. Asexual reproduction involves just one parent and produces genetically identical offspring, or clones. You also need to know about contraception within this. Hormonal methods like the pill, implant, or injection stop ovulation. Barrier methods such as condoms and diaphragms prevent sperm from meeting the egg. Surgical methods like sterilisation or vasectomy are permanent and prevent fertilisation altogether. The nervous system is another thing to revise. You'll need to understand the pathway of a reflex arc which follows this sequence. Stimulus, receptor, sensory neuron, relay neuron, motor neuron, effector, and response. When studying the brain, focus on the key areas. The cerebrum is responsible for memory, thinking, and speech. The cerebellum controls balance and coordination. The medulla controls automatic functions like heartbeat and breathing. Scientists study the brain using CT scans by examining patients with brain injuries and through electrical stimulation of different brain areas to observe their effects. The structure and function of the kidney is the final area we think may be tested. The kidneys filter the blood to remove urea, excess water, and ions. They also perform selective reabsorption, where useful substances like glucose, amino acids, and some water are reabsorbed back into the blood. The nephrons are the tiny filtering units inside the kidneys. Urea, a waste product, is removed in the urine. If the kidneys fail, treatments include dialysis, which filters the blood externally, and kidney transplants, which provide a more permanent solution but come with a risk of rejection. Let's now move on to GCSE Higher Combined Science. Now, here are the 2025 predicted topics for OCR Gateway GCSE Combined Science for Higher Paper 1, of course. These predictions are based on past paper trends and topic frequency. Remember, while these are strong indicators, it's important to revise the entire specification to be fully prepared. Now, one of the key topics to start with is photosynthesis. The word equation you need to know is carbon dioxide plus water produces glucose and oxygen. This process takes place in the chloroplasts, which contain a green pigment called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll absorbs light energy needed for the reaction. Photosynthesis is influenced by light intensity, carbon dioxide concentration, and temperature. As light intensity increases, the rate of photosynthesis increases, but only up to a point. More carbon dioxide also increases the rate. Temperature plays a crucial role. Too low and the reaction slows down. Too high and the enzymes involved in the process denature, causing the reaction to stop. In the required practical, know that you need to investigate the effect of light on the rate of photosynthesis. Typically, this involves using pondweed in a beaker of water. A light source is placed at varying distances from the plant, and students either count the number of oxygen bubbles produced or measure the volume of gas collected to determine how light intensity affects photosynthesis. The next topic is cell transport, which includes diffusion and active transport. Diffusion is the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. It's a passive process, meaning it does not require energy. Examples of diffusion include oxygen and carbon dioxide moving in and out of cells, and glucose and amino acids being absorbed into the bloodstream in the small intestine. In contrast, active transport is the movement of substances from a low concentration to a high concentration. This process requires energy. Examples include root hair cells in plants absorbing mineral ions from the soil and glucose being reabsorbed in the kidneys after filtration. Next, revise homeostasis, which is the maintenance of a stable internal environment in the body. A key aspect of homeostasis is blood glucose regulation. When blood sugar levels are too high, the hormone insulin is released. Insulin instructs the liver to store excess glucose and glycogen. When blood sugar levels are too low, glucagon is released, telling the liver to convert glycogen back into glucose and release it into the bloodstream. Now, this leads us to diabetes. In type 1, the body doesn't produce insulin, and this must be managed with regular insulin injections. In type 2 diabetes, the body's cells stop responding to insulin, and this condition is usually managed through a healthy diet and regular exercise. Another important area is plant transport, which includes the structure and function of the xylem and phloem, as well as the process of transpiration. The xylem carries water and minerals from the roots to the rest of the plant. It only moves in one direction and is made up of dead cells with walls reinforced by a substance called lignin. The phloem transports sugars and other nutrients both up and down the plant. It is made of living cells and contains sieve plates which help control the flow of substances. Here, transpiration is the process where water vapour is lost from the leaves through tiny openings called stomata. Several environmental factors increase the rate of transpiration: higher temperature, lower humidity, stronger wind, and higher light intensity. In the required practical, you'd use photometer to measure water uptake, which is used as an indirect measure of transpiration. By changing environmental conditions such as temperature, wind, or light, students can observe how each one affects the rate of water loss. Now, next we have reproduction. Sexual reproduction involves two parents and produces offspring that are genetically different. This leads to variation within a species. Now, in contrast, asexual reproduction involves only one parent and produces genetically identical offspring known as clones. Understanding different methods of contraception is essential. Hormonal methods, such as the pill, implants, or injections, work by stopping ovulation. Barrier methods like condoms or diaphragms prevent the sperm from meeting the egg. Surgical methods, such as sterilisation or vasectomy, offer permanent prevention of pregnancy. Finally, the nervous system is something which may come up too. One key sequence to remember is the reflex arc. It starts with a stimulus, which is detected by a receptor. The signal travels along a sensory neuron to a relay neuron in the spinal cord, then to a motor neuron, which sends the signal to an effector, resulting in a response. Okay, those are our higher combined predictions. We now have foundation separate. So first, one of the key topics in biology is photosynthesis, including the required practical techniques associated with it. The word equation for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide plus water produces glucose and oxygen. This process occurs in the chloroplasts, which are structures found in plant cells. These chloroplasts contain a green pigment called chlorophyll, which is responsible for absorbing light energy needed for the reaction. Several factors influence the rate of photosynthesis. Light intensity is important. More light leads to more photosynthesis, although only up to a certain point. Similarly, increasing the concentration of carbon dioxide also increases the rate. Temperature is another crucial factor. If it's too low, the reaction happens slowly, but if the temperature is too high, the enzymes that control photosynthesis become denatured and stop working. In the required practical for this topic, students investigate how light affects the rate of photosynthesis. This is typically done using pondweed placed in a beaker of water. A light source is moved to different distances from the plant, and the rate of photosynthesis is measured by either counting the number of bubbles of oxygen produced or by collecting and measuring the volume of gas released. The next topic to brush up on is cell transport, which includes two major processes, diffusion and active transport. Diffusion is the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. It's a passive process, meaning it doesn't require any energy. Examples of diffusion include oxygen and carbon dioxide moving in and out of cells during respiration, and glucose and amino acids being absorbed into the bloodstream in the small intestine. Active transport is the movement of substances from a low concentration to a high concentration. And unlike diffusion, it requires energy. Examples of active transport include root hair cells in plants absorbing mineral ions from the soil and the reabsorption of glucose in the kidneys after it has been filtered out of the blood. Another vital area of study is homeostasis, which refers to the maintenance of a stable internal environment in the body. One of the key examples of homeostasis is the control of blood glucose levels. When blood sugar levels rise, the hormone insulin is released. Insulin tells the liver to store the excess glucose as glycogen. This process is especially important when looking at diabetes. In type 1 diabetes, the body is unable to produce insulin. This condition is managed through regular insulin injections. In type 2 diabetes, the body's cells no longer respond properly to insulin. This form of diabetes is often linked to lifestyle and can be managed through a healthy diet and regular exercise. Now, another major topic is plant transport, including the structure and function of the xylem and phloem, as well as the process of transpiration. The xylem is responsible for carrying water and minerals from the roots to the leaves. It only moves in one direction and is made of dead cells with walls that are strengthened by a substance called lignin. The phloem, in contrast, transports sugars and nutrients both up and down the plant. It's made of living cells and contains sieve plates, which help regulate the flow of substances. Transpiration is the process through which water vapour is lost from the leaves, mainly through small openings called stomata. Several environmental factors can increase the rate of transpiration. These include higher temperatures, lower humidity, increased wind, and greater light intensity. In the required practical for transpiration, students use a device called a photometer to measure how much water a plant takes up. By changing conditions such as temperature, light intensity, or wind speed, they can observe how each factor affects the rate of water loss from the plant. Now, next up is the topic of reproduction, which includes both sexual and asexual methods, along with contraception. Sexual reproduction involves two parents and produces offspring that are genetically different, which leads to variation within a species. In contrast, asexual reproduction involves just one parent and results in offspring that are genetically identical to the parent. These are known as clones. There are several methods of contraception. Hormonal methods, such as the pill, implant, or injection, work by preventing ovulation. Barrier methods, like condoms and diaphragms, stop sperm from reaching the egg. Surgical methods, including sterilization and vasectomy, are permanent and prevent the possibility of fertilization altogether. Another core topic is the nervous system, including the brain and how reflex actions work. A reflex arc is the pathway taken by a nerve impulse during a reflex response. It begins with a stimulus, which is detected by a receptor. The signal is then passed along a sensory neuron to a relay neuron in the spinal cord, and from there to a motor neuron. The motor neuron carries the signal to an effector, such as a muscle, which then produces a response. Understanding the brain is also key. The cerebrum is responsible for memory, thinking, and speech. The cerebellum controls balance and coordination. The medulla, located at the base of the brain, is responsible for automatic functions such as heartbeat and breathing. And then lastly, students need to understand the structure and function of the kidney. The kidneys have two main roles: filtering the blood to remove waste products such as urea, excess water, and ions, and performing selective reabsorption, where useful substances like glucose, amino acids, and some water are taken back into the bloodstream. The kidney contains many tiny filtering units called nephrons, which carry out these processes. Urea, which is a waste product formed from the breakdown of proteins, is eventually removed from the body in urine. So those are our foundation separate predictions. Now, finally, we have foundation combined. Now, these predictions are based on previous trends and patterns in the exams. However, it is essential to revise the full content to make sure that you're ready for anything that could come up. So to start, we suggest that you revise photosynthesis. The word equation to remember here is carbon dioxide plus water produces glucose and oxygen. This process takes place in the chloroplasts, which are parts of plant cells that contain chlorophyll, a pigment that absorbs light energy. Several factors affect the rate of photosynthesis. These include light intensity, carbon dioxide concentration, and temperature. As light intensity increases, the rate of photosynthesis also increases, but only up to a certain point. A higher concentration of carbon dioxide also boosts the rate. Temperature is a key factor. If it's too low, the reaction is slow. If it's too high, enzymes become denatured and the process stops. In the required practical for this topic, students investigate how light affects the rate of photosynthesis. The method involves placing pondweed in a beaker of water and shining a light at different distances from it. The rate of photosynthesis is measured either by counting the bubbles of oxygen produced or by measuring the volume of gas collected. Now, next is cell transport, which includes diffusion and active transport. Diffusion is the movement of molecules from a high concentration to a low concentration. It's a passive process, meaning it doesn't require any energy. Some examples include oxygen and carbon dioxide moving in and out of cells, and glucose and amino acids being absorbed in the small intestine. Active transport is the opposite. It moves substances from a low concentration to a high concentration and does require energy. For example, root hair cells use active transport to absorb minerals from the soil, and the kidneys use it to reabsorb glucose during filtration. The topic of homeostasis is all about keeping internal conditions in the body stable. A key example is the control of blood glucose levels. When blood sugar levels are too high, the hormone insulin is released. Insulin tells the liver to store the excess glucose as glycogen. This is especially relevant to the condition known as diabetes. In type 1 diabetes, the body doesn't produce insulin, and this has to be managed through injections. In type 2 diabetes, the body cells stop responding properly to insulin. This form of diabetes is often linked to lifestyle and can be managed through diet and exercise. Now, another major topic is plant transport, including the roles of the xylem and the phloem, as well as the process of transpiration. The xylem carries water and minerals from the roots to the rest of the plant in one direction only. It's made up of dead cells and has strong walls reinforced with lignin. The phloem is responsible for transporting sugars and nutrients throughout the plant, both upwards and downwards. Like the xylem, the phloem is made of living cells and contains sieve plates which help regulate the flow of materials. Transpiration is the process by which water vapour is lost from the leaves of a plant through small openings called stomata. Several environmental conditions can increase the rate of transpiration. These include higher temperatures, lower humidity, increased wind, and brighter light. In the required practical for this topic, you'd use a device called a potometer to measure water uptake by a plant. By changing the surrounding conditions, such as increasing the temperature, wind, or light, students can investigate how these factors affect the rate of water loss. Now, finally, we have the topic of reproduction, which covers both sexual and asexual reproduction, along with methods of contraception. In sexual reproduction, two parents are involved and the offspring are genetically different. This genetic variation is important for evolution and adaptation. Asexual reproduction, on the other hand, only involves one parent. The offspring are genetically identical and are known as clones. Here you also need to understand different methods of contraception, like I say. Hormonal methods such as the pill, implant, or injection prevent ovulation from occurring. Barrier methods like condoms and diaphragms stop sperm from reaching the egg. Surgical methods such as sterilisation or vasectomy are permanent and prevent fertilisation altogether. Okay, those are all of our predicted topics for 2025. Please remember to revise everything you need a refresh on, as of course, these are just predictions and we don't want any panic on exam day. Most of all, remember that these exams are important, but they don't define you. It's normal to feel stressed, but remember to take breaks, get enough sleep, stay hydrated, and make sure you talk to people for support and just some time away from the stress. Now, best of luck in your GCSE exams.